everybody, Aimer here again with another Mission Impossible episode review. This time I'm reviewing Season 2, Episode 3, which is called The Survivors. So, Jim cruises in his big car to a very out-of-the-way place to get his instructions. The mission: two scientists and their wives have been kidnapped by enemy agent Eric Stavak, as they have the knowledge to build a super weapon. Stavak is searching for the third scientist, who has the piece of the puzzle that he's missing, basically, and the IMF must stop him and rescue the hostages. This time it's the usual team, including Willie. There's a brief discussion foreshadowing some events in the apartment scene, and off we go. Cinnamon becomes Susan Webster, the wife of the third scientist, Robert Webster. She attends her mother's funeral, accompanied by Rollin. Stavak and his second-in-command, Yubov, are also present at the funeral. They knock out Cinnamon's limo driver, replacing him with their own man. Cinnamon activates a tracker on her necklace, which allows Barney and Willie to track her from their nondescript truck. Stavak's driver whisks Cinnamon and Rollin to a warehouse in what looks like San Francisco's Chinatown, covers up their faces, and takes them to his underground lair. It's not really a lair, but I don't know what else to call it, so I'm going to call it a lair. Stavak thinks he's got Robert Webster, but Rollin says he's just Susan's friend. Susan reveals that she is separated from Robert, and they plan to divorce, which royally ticks Stavak off, and Stavak demands that Susan call Robert. But she says it would be pointless, as he no longer really cares for her, and she doesn't really care for him. Then comes the threat. Stavak tells her that she needs to get Robert to surface or die, and tells him that the Stoners and the Cardells will suffer the same fate, the other scientists and their wives. Rollin and Cinnamon are put into a detention area with the others. One of the ladies says, "You're not Robert Webster's wife." Uh-oh. Until Cinnamon responds that she knows she wasn't a good wife to Robert, but regrets it, quietly saying that they are there to help. Willie and Barney scope out the territory outside, while Rollin makes his own notes quietly in the cell and gets his bearings with a cleverly hidden compass. Cinnamon agrees to call Robert in exchange for $25,000. Stavak is only too happy to make the deal. Cinnamon calls Robert, who is Jim, of course. She says she's lonely after losing her mother and wants to see him, and Robert agrees. She cleverly tells Robert to meet her where they first met, instead of the restaurant that Stavak instructed, to make sure that he cooperates and she's able to get away safely. Stavak and his men take Jim and allow Cinnamon and Rollin to walk away, but Stavak has one of his goons follow them. Fortunately, the goon is taken out of commission by Barney and Willie. After pinpointing the location of the lair, the above-ground IMF members start the rest of their plan. Cinnamon calls the police and reports a gas leak requiring evacuation of the area, while the men dress up as gas company workers and start strategically drilling holes into the building, while Willie sets up a long tube going into the entrance. Jim is taken to the detention cell alongside the other hostages, and after some time, Stavak demands some answers. Jim, as Robert, is willing to give up some information, but the others are not, figuring that Stavak will kill them all anyway. Jim slowly starts writing down some equations to buy time. But Yubov, who is a scientist as well, isn't satisfied. Suddenly, the wall starts shaking as though an earthquake is happening, and Cinnamon kills the power. Willie dumps cement down the tube, and Stavak quickly learns that they are trapped. Jim says that there's a gas leak, courtesy of the IMF, so staying still and waiting for a rescue doesn't make sense. Jim MacGyvers a radio, which allows him to hear a radio broadcast, which is actually Rollin broadcasting information in code about the devastating earthquake that just hit San Francisco. Using the info, Jim locates a drain and sets the others to gather material so that he can blast a hole in the wall, covering up the explosion with mattresses because of the gas. They start digging into the wall towards a storm drain so that they can get out, as Barney and Willie start removing some of the rubble they have created. Jim finally breaks through to the drain, and predictably, Stavak forces him back through the tunnel that he's dug. He directs Yubov and his other men to go first, holding the hostages at gunpoint as he exits and collapses the tunnel behind him. Jim leads the hostages back to the main entrance and gets them out through the ladder that Barney and Willie left behind, while Stavak surfaces on a San Francisco street, where, of course, nothing out of the ordinary has happened. The IMF leads him and his men into the hands of the police and a waiting paddy wagon. Mission accomplished. I'm going to give this episode a grade of B. It's close to a B plus, but I'm going to say B for a couple of points that I'll elaborate on. What's good? It is a simple plot. I don't mean that in a bad way at all. Simple doesn't mean easy to pull off. When you lay out the steps and say we're going to do this and this and this and this, it makes sense in terms of how you're going to accomplish it. Stavak is no pushover. This guy's not a schmuck. The IMF really had to work in order to take this guy down. And, the look on Albert Paulson, who plays Stavak in this episode, at the end, where he sees that nothing really happened and he's really, really, really been duped, is priceless. So it's an elaborate plan. But it's a simple plan when you kind of break it down into its steps. And again, it's one of those things about where this is one where probably Jim Phelps worked backwards and says, okay, at the end, we're going to need to convince this guy that, he's escaped, and then he's escaped the peril of being trapped after an earthquake, and he's just going to emerge from the San Francisco street. Nice job there. Also, something good that I noticed, there's a bit of a Chinatown vibe to some of the music. I found that to be really nice. And, it's realistic. I'm pretty sure that this was filmed in Los Angeles Chinatown, but they made it out to be a San Francisco Chinatown for plot purposes. But they used, Chinese American extras and things like that. So there's some realism there, and I thought that was a really, really nice touch. Couple of things that I really, really didn't like. First of all, Albert Paulson and as Stavak and Lawrence Dane as Yubov, they are fantastic actors. They appear on Mission a lot, and I really, really like them. I think that Paulson gets a lot of screen time, and his performance is really, really great. I think Lawrence Dane as Yubov is kind of wasted in this episode. He doesn't get to do as much as I would like. He's a fantastic actor just with his eyes and his facial expressions, and he doesn't get to do a lot of that in this episode, and I was kind of disappointed. I always want to see more of him. I'm not sure how they could have fit that into the plot, but I really, really wish that they could have. Albert Paulson is kind of very one-dimensional in this episode, which I kind of don't like. In other episodes that we're going to see him in, sometimes he's kind of subdued and quiet, and other times he's really, really gregarious and yelling and shouting. That's more of his typical MO. Here, he's a little bit more one-dimensional, but it's not too bad. And the only other thing that I kind of... I guess it's okay. It's not really a bad thing. I mentioned before in a previous episode, I think it was Action from season 1, that I don't really like when the IMF burns the marks. Meaning that, at the end of the episode, they're all kind of standing there looking at Stavak saying, "We got you." And usually that's not a good thing. In this case, it's not so bad. It's kind of necessary for plot purposes, like they're there when Stavak emerges from the storm drain and comes out of the manhole. And in this case, it's okay. I don't mind it so much because, in the previous one, in Action, they did it to somebody who's basically kind of a civilian, I guess you could say. In this case, Stavak is an enemy agent. So, to say, look, we got you, he would have done the same thing in their place. So I really kind of didn't mind it so much over here. And that's why I'm going to give this one a grade of B. Thank you for watching and listening. Please like this video, please subscribe to my channel, and please leave your comments below. I'd love to hear what you had to say about this episode, agree or disagree. Thank you again, and I'll see you next time.